Start ride. Ride started. Ooh, it's a little breezier than I was expecting. Ooh, feeling this in my knees already. Okay. Well, we're going to try to get a decent ride in today. Weather the last couple days has not been conducive to bicycle riding. 50 to 70 mile an hour winds. We're giving the state 4130 another run. I'm hoping 90 minutes to 2 hours of riding today. And yeah, I think going in, leaving into the wind is a good plan. We'll see what happens. Riding Fort Worth Trinity trails, which will give us a good mix of pavement and gravel, and depending where I end up, maybe even some single track. But we're going to try to gravel it up as much as we can. Glad I wore long sleeves. First gravel. Our maiden voyage on the state didn't have a whole lot of proper gravel. Enough to get a sense of what it'll be like. I'm not going to splash through a puddle just for the sake of splashing through a puddle. And I hope this isn't one of those days that the wind turns around on me, which seems to be pretty common around here. You go out into the wind, all right, that's fine. I'll just let it push me back at the end of the day. And the end of the day comes and wind changes direction on you. You got headwind coming and going. What the hell? I think we'll do our main commentary on the way back with a tailwind. Sidewalk closed. Now, let's see what the drops feel like. Because this is going to be a headwind grind. Oh, the wind is kicking in. Just Texas Hills. Time for a drink. 20 minutes in, and we've gone a whopping 3.5 miles. A little bit above my preferred heart rate. Let's bring it down just a notch. One notch. A moment of discomfort in the saddle area. Can't say I'm surprised. I do prefer the stiff leather saddles myself, and chances are greater than zero that we do not have this fit dialed in just yet. I'm sure there's tweaks and adjustments to be made. Don't know why those skunks always gather around the disc golf courses. Gateway, West Side. I am not going to try that single track on this bike today. And there's probably some stuff down from the wind. Which way do we want to go? I think we want to go this way, I think. Traditionally not a particularly tough trail. I don't expect it to have changed much. Oh, yep. Trio. We may do 45, 45 or something like that. I don't know that I want to cross the road up here. Definitely wet. And now that I think about it, I am not positive I locked my truck before we left. Let's take care of that just to get that out of my head. Keep holding. Sent. There we go. Lock. What happened to the Spirit of Gravel? Where'd it go? I'm well aware there are plenty of people that poo-poo the notion that there ever was a Spirit of Gravel, or that it's an appropriate term of any kind. I beg to differ, but I do welcome contrasting opinions on the topic. I think there's a racer's perspective of the Spirit of Gravel. When I say racers, I'm not speaking specifically to people that ride gravel competitively at your local or regional events. When I'm talking racers that have their own perceptions of the Spirit of Gravel, it's the highest end regional racers, but higher end national and international racers, and what their perceptions of the Spirit of Gravel were, particularly in that competitive environment. And I think the racing Spirit of Gravel was always butting heads with what I consider the traditional Spirit of Gravel, in that why people started riding these events and what basically allowed it to grow the way that it did, starting about 10 years ago. We've been doing it since 2010 on an accidental basis. Realistically, about 2015, 2016, we really found our stride with it. We really found our niche, and I think we were instrumental, be it positive or negative. Different people have different perceptions in the way gravel evolved. There was a distinct shift, basically 2020 COVID year. There was a distinct shift then, but there was a transition from 2016 it started. 17 was when it really got spicy as far as the gravel scene transitioning. Realistically, 2017, 18, and 19 were that transition period. And the funny part about it, in my mind, is a lot of the people that are poo-pooing the supposed Spirit of Gravel, that's about the time they got into it. And the Spirit of Gravel was pretty well established a decade before then. I mean, everything evolves over time, there's no doubt about that. But that 2016 to 2019 era, that's when gravel exploded. That's basically when the traditional USA Cycling roadies, and I don't use that in a derogatory fashion by any stretch, because we were definitely ahead of the curve with that group compared to the rest of the gravel scene. The traditional roadie started transitioning throughout the United States from road to gravel. And a lot of them couldn't wrap their head around the gravel scene from what they were used to and how racing worked. And a lot of them came into it with the, well, we got to fix this. We got to turn gravel into proper racing. I get that. People are comfortable with what they know. But the net result was more of those people that transitioned from the traditional road racing decided that they liked the way stuff worked on gravel closer to what it already was, as opposed to trying to turn gravel into road. I know there's people that are going to argue with me and say, oh my God, they did turn it into road. There is no doubt that the road racers coming into gravel had an effect on events and racing, and there's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. And lots of it was positive, some of it wasn't. Coming left. There, you know, that's part of the evolutionary process. Realistically, bringing different DNA into the mix, so to speak. And I think the net result was that more roadies adapted to the way gravel events worked, as opposed to those that were insisting that gravel needed to be more formally structured. And that's part of the beauty of gravel, is every event's different. Every event has its own personality. Every promoter is welcome to put on the race that they want to. And if they want to put on a super structured, categorized race, go for it. All those words to say that transition period, that's what a lot of people considered the spirit of gravel, because that's when they first got into gravel. Where some of us that have been graveling longer, we have different perceptions of what made up the spirit of gravel. And people that were doing it longer than me, there's some, not a lot, there's some, they're going to have a different perception of the spirit of gravel, or what maybe they don't even, they don't agree that there's a spirit of gravel. It's just, this is the way we did stuff. Make no mistake, when we started doing our stuff in 2010, we turned over the apple carts for the existing gravel promoters and events and the way they did things. We were not welcomed. We were doing it wrong. We charged for events. We had aid stations. We marked the course. We gave out GPS files for the course. So some were telling us that we were outside the spirit of gravel then. And we've always done stuff in this manner, in that the events we started were geared towards ultra endurance mountain bike racers, the 24-hour racers, the 12-hour racers, doing that sort of thing. And where we were in North Texas, we don't have any epic trails. We don't have any 50-mile long trails. And granted, a lot of 24-hour races are just multiple laps on the same 8-mile loop or whatever. Now, I understand at the race level that works fine, but for endurance training, some of us got bored with that shit. We wanted to see different stuff when we're out doing a training ride all day long, and then started riding gravel because we really didn't want to deal with the stupid people on the roads. And so we started doing our stuff to support ultra endurance mountain bike riders and racers. And that was a lot of that scene is what many of the original gravel events were built around. It was definitely mountain bike oriented, and it was endurance oriented. And so a lot of that personality of the niche of the 24-hour mountain bike racers and events ultimately transferred to the events, the gravel events that were popping up and the promoters that were involved with it. It was very mountain bike oriented, definitely in the stuff we were doing, and I don't think we were unique in that fashion. And where we kind of almost from the beginning, we kind of disrupted the gravel scene because our first event, we put it together, it was meant to be, it was more like a rule of three, quite frankly, than a true gravel event. It was truly mixed surface with an epic private property mountain bike trail in the mix, fantastic network of gravel roads that we still use to this day, our Red River Riot coming up in April. And obviously sometimes you got to use the pavement to connect all those dots. And it just so happened that we had a torrential downpour right at the start of our event that ended up washing out the trails for the day, and we called an audible at the start line and just basically sent everybody out on the gravel roads, which were still muddy as hell. And people came back from that ride, all that adventure, all that different, all that new, and said, when are we doing it again? Let's do some more of this. And that's what started us down the path of doing our gravel specific events. But for years we still had endurance mountain biking events, and traditional mountain bike cross country racing was part of our mix as well. And there's just a bunch of logistical reasons that over the years we've evolved to more gravel oriented and bikepacking oriented as opposed to single track. And I would love to be mostly mountain bike oriented. Wouldn't hurt my feelings at all. It's not practical. So a byproduct of that first Red River Riot, like I said, it was put together as a mixed surface event with, quite frankly, part of the idea being what's the right bike for this. And from the get-go, we had even though we were mountain bike heavy, some of our faster mountain bike racers, they were definitely into the cyclocross scene around here, and some of them were into the road scene some too, even though they leaned towards mountain bike and cyclocross. And I'm pretty sure the first Red River Riot was won on a mountain bike. I don't think it was a cross bike. I think it was a couple years before a cross bike won it, but I could be wrong. But our first one, it wasn't meant to be, there was a racing component to it, but it was more about the party and the group and the crowd, and let's all go have a good time, camp for the weekend and all that good stuff. So that was the focus, but we gave an environment to the racers that, hey, if you want to duke it out and beat each other up, we'll give you the opportunity to. This headwind sucks. We're just going to make it to the bridge and turn around and soft pedal back. We're at an hour 18. So we did our first Red River Riot. And some of the competitive types were tapped into the road racing scene too. A couple, not a lot. And the feedback from those folks was, you know, our North Texas cyclocross scene is coming on strong. A lot of these road racers have cross bikes now. Those would be a good fit for a gravel only race. You might want to look at doing another one of these, but that's oriented more towards the road riders than the mountain bike riders. And that made a lot of sense to me. So our first Red River Riot was really geared, so to speak, towards the mountain bike crowd. The 12 and 24 hour endurance mountain bike crowd. So we opted to go ahead and put together our first Texas Chainring Massacre a few months later. That was going to be geared towards the road riders. And so it was a more structured, formal race and no single. I think we were fortunate in that first Texas Chainring Massacre that we had enough overlap of mountain bike racers and the road racers, and we still geared that event to have a big non-competitive group as well. But the Texas Chainring Massacre was definitely racer focused. But we had enough mountain bikers and road racers in the mix that, and it was such a new concept that I didn't get caught up in having to justify the way I did things. It was brand new. So the competitors justified the oddball pieces to each other, the things that were kind of roadie focused that maybe mountain bike racers weren't comfortable with or wasn't towards the top of their list of favorite things. The road racers go, I get it, but this is why this works this way. And the same on things that might have been a little more mountain biker oriented. So there was a lot of crosstalk, cross-pollination, so to speak. And that was 2010. And like I said, we really evolved things for the next 5 years, finding what worked, what didn't, growing things. And by 2016, really kind of had a system. of what worked for us. We weren't implying that's what everyone else should be doing by any stretch, but it's what worked for us. And I liked that a lot of the stuff that we started doing kind of became the standard for not just gravel events, but even road and mountain bike events going forward as well. I mean, yeah, we charged an entry fee, but back in those days, a big part of that entry fee was covering food and beer. I mean, we put together a bunch of really cool custom trophies over the years. And that kind of became the standard, again, not just in gravel, but even in the road racing scene. That there became more of a social element there. Still not as much as mountain bike and gravel, but more than had been there previously. Now, since then, our stuff's kind of evolved where we've gone more towards the grassroots side of things, gone towards free events. And when we were doing it for 50 or 75 people, we could cook up barbecue for everyone, make that part of the mix. But once I started getting to 400 or 500 on a semi-regular basis, my wife said, we ain't doing that no more. What happened to the spirit of gravel? The big shift was 2020. There were two key things that happened then. I mean, well, three. I mean, obviously COVID was part of the mix, but the COVID was the basic instigator of it all. One was a lot of new people got into cycling that had no previous relationship with cycling. So they didn't know what came before them getting their bike, and a lot of them got gravel bikes because that's the whole cycling industry was shifting towards gravel at that point. All the bike shops had, at the time, gravel bikes on the floor and pointed everybody to those, and this is a do everything bike. And I don't argue with that logic at all. I agree completely. It was a good bike for a lot of those new riders. But some of them started showing up for events, and they didn't have an existing endurance background. They didn't have an existing racing background. They didn't know how you were supposed to interact with others out on the course, sort of thing. They didn't know what they did. For them, there was no such thing as a spirit of gravel because they didn't know that this is the way people did things, or in this situation, it's an unwritten rule, we do this or that. So that started to dilute that part of the spirit of gravel that was just common understanding among everybody that was involved in the sport at that point. And I'm not saying it's a positive or negative. I'm saying that was a big part of that dilution of the traditional spirit of gravel. The other component of it, quite frankly, was the big national events that really kicked in during COVID, that they had the financial wherewithal and the oomph to be doing things in large scale that a lot of the independent smaller promoters like us, that this is where gravel started, sort of thing, we weren't in a position to sometimes even put on events. I went through most of 2021 where my traditional venues we couldn't get permits. We weren't allowed to do events. But some of the big national ones, they, They had the juice, they had the financial wherewithal, they had the connections that hey, we're going to do this here, and we're bringing 4,000 people to the community. They're going to make things happen for us. And I'm not saying that's a negative. I'm saying that was a shift, and combined with the newer gravel riders, that became the perception of this is what gravel is. And it was a bunch of people from all over the place showing up for the same event. It wasn't a community of riders that were getting together on a semi-regular basis, sort of thing, if that makes any sense. And people with the previous experience, shared experience, and knowing how the unwritten rules, for lack of a better term, worked. So a lot of people have said, well, that was when the Spirit of Gravel went away, is in that time frame. Different people have different reasons why. That's my interpretation of it. But I don't think the Spirit of Gravel went away. I think it's just people weren't exposed to it. And they didn't, it wasn't a consideration. And when the Lifetime Grand Prix and these big events with the big purses started kicking in and doing true national and international racing, that's when the racing spirit of gravel definitely went extinct, because there's just so much money on the line, so much prestige on the line, so much sponsorship support on the line, that what might have been unwritten rules amongst the racers on how we do things at aid stations or whatever else, or we're going to agree to not race until the last 20 miles unofficially or whatever. A lot of that went out the window. And quite frankly, from my perspective, from the racing side of things, I generally kind of applaud that, because nothing pisses me off more than a bunch of racers that are soft pedaling for 98 miles just so they can set up for a sprint finish at mile 100. But the everyday riders, which is over 90% of the gravel riders, even people that call themselves racers, Spirit of Gravel is still alive and well. Some people just need an introduction to it. I think that's what we're